like clock. I can't stop. Fuck around, make my 40 pop.
Guys, we have a whole bunch of spoilers for the upcoming episodes of the Boruto anime in the Kata actuation arc, and I'm pretty sure you guys are going to be super excited to see. But without further ado, getting into the episodes are going to be episode 161 through episode 164. The first one is going to be episode 161. The title is going to be The Castle of Nightmare. Into the actual paragraph, it says, the cells that have been harvested from the first Hokage Hashirama Senju possess powers to allow the explosive activation of biological energy. Depending on how they're used, Hashirama cells can become something dangerous. It seems as though Hashirama cells were related to the recent incident. Boruto and his comrades learned that it's in the hands of a very rich person who resides in the prisoner's castle in the Land of Silence, and so Boruto and the others are planning to retrieve them. However, there are others who are going after the Hashirama cells, trying to steal them as well. In addition, there's been some suspicious movements from Victor, the pharmaceutical company president whom Boruto and his comrades happened to meet the other day, as well as a mysterious man named Deepa. Alright, now the most interesting thing in this paragraph is going to be the last two sentences, where it does talk about Victor and Deepa and them moving suspiciously. More importantly, Deepa is going to make an appearance in this episode. Victor played a very huge role in the last two episodes, but we haven't really seen Deepa before. We've seen a small snippet of him a couple of episodes ago, but that was pretty much it. Now in this episode, it seems like we're going to get to see a lot more of Deepa. Now I don't necessarily expect him to have the whole episode surrounding around a character like Deepa. I think he's probably going to make a small appearance, definitely longer than his last appearance. Possibly 1 to 2 minutes of Deepa would definitely be a very good amount for me, even if it's a little bit shorter, possibly 30 seconds to a minute. That would still be very impactful given his actual role. For example, the last time that we did see Deepa, he really didn't have that much of a role. He didn't have any speaking parts. We couldn't really gauge his personality. We didn't know exactly how strong he was. But given Deepa's involvement in episode 161, it could possibly be very impactful, especially seeing as how the spoilers did say that he was doing something suspicious. Now the other big part of this paragraph is of course the Hashirama cells. The Hashirama cells is something that I personally thought that was only really going to be native to the 5 great nations and specifically the Hidden Leaf Village, but recently we found out that Hashirama cells has actually hit the black market, and for the Hashirama cells to be in the hands of a very rich family or a very rich person, I strongly doubt that this very rich person is going to do anything bad with the Hashirama cells. The worry is that it's on the black market, aka he's selling it to other people, and if he is selling it to other people, that could possibly mean that it could possibly end up in the hands of a very evil person. Of course, in the right hand, it could do a lot of damage. Now into the next episode, it's going to be episode 162. The title is going to be Escape the Encirclement. Now into the paragraph, it says Boruto and his comrades were dragged into a ransacking incident that transpired at the prisoner's castle. Not only were they considered to be the culprits, but they ended up getting pursued by some scoundrels from the Land of Silence. Even though Boruto and his comrades wanted to capture the true perpetrators of the ransacking by any means necessary, they kept being obstructed by the scoundrels who continued to attack and descend upon them one after another, and so they weren't able to pursue the real culprits. With Boruto's quick-wittedness, they were able to temporarily get out of the crisis. However, even more trouble arose, and then they got completely surrounded by the scoundrels. Boruto and the others were ultimately cut off from their escape route. Alright, now this episode, in my opinion, is probably going to be a very difficult one for a lot of the fans out there, mainly because this being the Kata actuation arc, this sounds like it has absolutely nothing to do with the Kata organization. For this episode to actually be a success, there has to be something in the episode that the spoilers do not necessarily want us to know. For example, the ransacking being a whole plot by the Kata organization to throw Boruto and the rest of Team 7 off the scent of the Hashirama cells, mainly because the Kata organization wants to buy the Hashirama cells from that very rich person. Or the quote-unquote scoundrels could actually be a part of the Kata organization themselves. And not only that, in my opinion, one of the more important things is the fact that these scoundrels have to actually be strong. If these scoundrels just look like some fodder, some people that they could possibly just destroy in like 5 minutes, but they don't want to necessarily destroy them in because they want to maintain the peace, I think that would be very boring. If these scoundrels were actually extremely strong, each of them possibly able to solo Team 7 by themselves, also have some very interesting abilities, I think that right there would definitely bring a lot more interest to this episode. But regardless, this episode's story in itself forces the writers to work a lot harder in making this episode as entertaining as possible. But in the next episode, we have episode 163. Now the title is going to be The Pursuers. Into the actual paragraph, it says Boruto and his comrades have somehow managed to successfully escape the scoundrels. When Team 7 and the Joni Mujino were en route in their pursuit of the true perpetrators of the ransacking, they encountered a platoon of equally skilled Shinobi. Since they were unaware of each other's circumstances, it turned into a touch-and-go situation. In the midst of the tension running between them, and with Saratobi Konohamaru acting as the intermediary, they were able to acquire some intel from the platoon of Shinobi. The real culprits of the ransacking were Shinobi of the Fog Country, and so once again, Team 7 embarked upon their pursuit of the true perpetrators of ransacking. However, Deepa is then standing in their way. Alright, now this episode is probably going to be equally as the last episode, where it probably wouldn't be as interesting, mainly because it seemed like a very side mission that didn't really have anything to do with the Kata organization. But of course, the last sentences of this paragraph is the fact that Deepa was going to then end up standing in their way, and that right there definitely gives me a lot of hope for this episode, mainly because it possibly gives the writers the green light to show us exactly what Deepa and Victor are possibly planning for Team 7 for the future episodes. And not only that, this other team, quote unquote, equally in strength to Team 7 is possibly going to be a very interesting team for Team 7 to just converse with. It's probably going to be a clash of two worlds. Team 7, the current Team 7 right now, they have pretty much only lived in a land of peace, which would mean that this new team would probably have a lot more battle experience than the current Team 7, and our Team 7 could possibly see how that team handles business. For example, as Mujina was saying, they shouldn't necessarily trust anybody that they just met. That's a lesson that Boruto doesn't necessarily understand. So if Boruto sees this other team going about business in a certain way where they don't really trust Boruto, they don't really trust anybody in Team 7, and they don't know exactly what's going on, it's probably going to be a very eye-opening scene for Boruto and the rest of Team 7. And one thing that I definitely would not be surprised about is if we possibly see this team later on down the line. Now, I'm not saying in the next episode or the episode after that, or I'm saying possibly like 5 or 6 episodes, possibly when we get to the end of the Kata actuation arc. I'm not sure if they're going to be part of the good guys or the bad guys, but regardless, I think depending on their impact in this next episode, they could possibly make an appearance later on in the arc. Now, the next episode is episode 164. The title is going to be The Deadly Kenjutsu. Into the actual paragraph, it says, Boruto and his comrades have finally caught up to the real perpetrators of the ransacking, Shinobi siblings from the Fog Country. Not only do Boruto and the others have to contend with a monster that was summoned because of Kenjutsu by one of the siblings, Yuga, they also have to deal with being completely imprisoned within a strong barrier, even though they are astonished by the monster that indiscriminately snatches away chakra from whatever it can get its hands on. Boruto declares, let's defeat this thing and break out of the barrier. However, Mujino replies that they're in a situation where they probably don't know how they can deal with this peculiar jutsu. And so he flatly rejected Boruto's suggestion, saying that they should avoid engaging in excessive combat for now. Now, I'm kind of confused about this paragraph, mainly because it doesn't necessarily bring up anything about Deepa, even though in the last paragraph it did say that they were pretty much going to be confronted by Deepa. I don't necessarily want to read too deep into that, mainly because these are spoilers and they can't necessarily give out everything that's going to be happening in the episode itself, but that's just a point that I did want to touch on. Now, this paragraph also talked about some sort of forbidden jutsu that summoned a monster. Now, it's going to be very interesting to see exactly what type of abilities that these characters have. Of course, these characters are some very different characters that we have not necessarily seen before, mainly because they're coming from some very small villages that a lot of the Naruto fans have pretty much never heard about before. So of course, seeing their juice is probably going to be very interesting, and if they are extremely powerful, it's probably going to make for a very interesting episode. Now, of course, the main thing that we do want to see is going to be characters from the Kata organization. If Deepa or Victor does not make an appearance in this episode, it's probably going to be a very disappointing scene, but regardless, it could possibly be remedied by how interesting and how strong these characters that Boruto and the rest of Team 7 are going to be battling against, and how entertaining this quote-unquote forbidden technique is going to be. But let me know what you guys think about these spoilers in the comment section below, and give me the episode that you're most likely going to be excited for. But it's been your boy Baara, and we out.
It's a knife.